Welcome to PatsCast. I'm Brad Whitaker. What has been the biggest struggle for the New England Patriots over the last decade? It's drafting wide receivers. Whether it's guys like N'Keal Harry, Tyquan Thornton, or even drafting tight ends like Dalton Keene or Devin Asiasi, the Pats have struck out nearly every time the last decade. And in terms of free agency, they haven't done very well either. Guys like Nelson Aguilar, Jonnu Smith, Devontae Parker hasn't really panned out. The wide receiver position has been a real mess ever since the last couple years of the Tom Brady days in New England, and it's only gotten worse. However, they did luck out with the selection of Demario Douglas in the 6th round in this past draft. Douglas looks to be your typical New England Patriots reliable slot receiver like Julian Edelman, Jacoby Myers, Wes Welker, and Troy Brown. Yes, he fell to the 6th round. It was lucky, but it worked out. We got our guy, but we are still missing that true number one, that true outside threat that we've been asking for like over a decade now, like 15 years now. We really haven't even had it since Randy Moss. Now, a lot can happen between now and this time next week, but if Robert Kraft really does want to keep Bill Belichick around, particularly as an NFL GM, I'm not sure he's going to, but even as a head coach, if you want to keep Belichick around, they have an opportunity to address his biggest weakness as a head coach and GM, particularly if they maintain a top 3 pick, and then Belichick can actually focus on the things he really enjoys focusing on, which is the defense, and not as much on the skill position players. Yes, there are 3 quarterbacks in this draft who look to be potential franchise guys. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. We all know the names at this point. All 3 will likely go in the top 5 of the 2024 NFL draft. But you have to consider, how often do teams actually succeed at drafting quarterbacks early? Not very much. I heard yesterday, I think it was Phil Perry talking, that he said something like 20% or it was like 18% of first-round quarterbacks actually make it to a contract extension with the team who drafted them. So even if you're picking the guy who you think is a sure thing in the top 3, it often doesn't work out. Most of the time, it doesn't work out. I'm not saying Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels can't be that guy. If you got a shot to take them, maybe you do. But they are far from a sure thing because they are quarterbacks, and quarterbacks are hard to find in the NFL, at least as franchise guys. With this in mind, drafting Ohio State's Marvin Harrison Jr. is the closest you'll ever get to a sure thing in a draft. If you are not familiar with Harrison Jr., which you probably are, but if you're not, he is of course the son of Hall of Famer and Colts legend Marvin Harrison. He stands at 6'4", 205 pounds, and still runs a 4.39 40. He ran a 3.88 shuttle in high school, which is about as good as it gets even at the college level. All right, this guy is everything you want in a number 1 guy. On day 1, he would be an elite downfield and intermediate threat, and will do whatever you ask of him in the short game. Patriots have not had that type of player really since Randy Moss. They've tried. They tried it with Devontae Parker, but he's obviously not the guy. He can't create separation. You have a chance at drafting Marvin Harrison Jr., and then you can figure out the rest. But at least then you have that number 1 receiver. He's got decent hands, but most importantly, will win those contested catches that you brought in Devontae Parker to get, and he has not fulfilled that role. Marvin Harrison will fulfill that role and much more immediately if the Patriots were to draft him. Now, there are some weaknesses, obviously. I mean, his blocking could improve a little bit. Not like that's the most important thing for an outside number 1 receiver, but, you know, that is something especially the Patriots really like. And he could certainly improve on ball security. He kind of holds the ball, you know, very loosely when he runs with it. He could be better with sharp cuts, run after the catch, but he's got size. He's got the tools. Those are really minor weaknesses when you look at the strengths a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. could bring, especially with his soft hands, his great footwork, and his ability to make those acrobatic catches that are just so hard to get with the Patriots over these last few years. You throw up those 50-50 balls, and Devontae Parker really just kind of lays down. And that was supposedly his bread and butter, but it didn't work out. And now you have Harrison Jr., who you could pair with a guy like Demario Douglas, and you have your receiving core of the future. And then you can worry about the quarterback position later. Yes, I know you're passing up on Caleb Williams. You're probably not going to be able to get Caleb Williams unless you trade up. But you won't have a chance of Drake May or Jaden Daniels. But there are plenty of really great quarterbacks in this draft. And there aren't a lot of great quarterbacks in next year's draft. Maybe Shadur Sanders, but I don't know. And then you can bring back guys like Kendrick Bourne, who has expressed that he really does want to come back to the Patriots. He's also coming off an injury, so he'd be cheaper than he would otherwise. And maybe even Hunter Henry, you franchise tag him. I think that's the obvious choice if you're not able to draft a tight end in the early rounds. You can't fulfill all the positions that they need: tight end, wide receiver, tackle, maybe another offensive lineman in the draft. You're probably going to get about 2/3 of that, and then you're going to have to dress it along with the quarterback position in free agency if you can't fulfill those spots. But look, I understand the argument. You got to draft the quarterback, but like I said, it is never a sure thing, and this is a very, very deep draft where you could get someone very good in the second round who could potentially end up being better than Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. Michael Penix Jr., he's probably going to climb the ranks, especially the way he played in the college football playoff semifinals. If he plays well in the national championship game, expect to see him kind of go in the middle of the first round. J.J. McCarthy, he's kind of the biggest wild card, right? Probably a second or third round quarterback because he isn't asked to do too much. He has a lot of really good tools and a hell of an arm, but there are a lot of question marks there. But you could get McCarthy in the second or third round. And then there's the guy I really like who for some reason is flying so far under the radar, and that's Bo Nix. People say it's because he's old. It's like, okay, he's old, but he's mature, and you can see his development from when he was at Auburn to when he's at Oregon. You look at the college stats, he's been one of the very best in college football this year, one of the most efficient. He can do whatever you ask of him. I think Bo Nix would be a good gamble to have. And then, look, you still got Bailey Zappi there. You could have them compete. You could also sign a guy like Kirk Cousins in free agency. You bring in Kirk Cousins to New England, you're going to have a competent at least top 15, potentially top 10 NFL quarterback right away, and then you don't really have to worry about it as much. And you pair him with a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., Demario Douglas, bring in a few weapons, draft a tackle, and you got an offense, right? And again, I haven't given up on Bailey Zappi. He's probably a backup. I think he's earned the number 2 role with the way he's played. Yeah, he had 3 interceptions last week, but Pro Football Focus said none of those were turnover-worthy plays. I kind of disagree a little bit. They were partly his fault. But either way, Bailey Zappi has shown that when the going gets tough, the tough get going, unlike Mac Jones, where the going gets tough and the tough gets tougher. Look, they have options here, right? But you can get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. early in the first round, especially if you have a top 3 pick. A lot's going to depend on what happens against the New York Jets this Sunday. They fall to number 4, number 5. It's probably not as realistic. You could still draft a guy like Malik Nabers, who I really like, but he's Stephon Diggs, right? Like he's a 6-foot receiver, probably better in the slot than the outside, although he can do both. But if you really need a number 1 guy, an outside threat, a guy who's going to fill what's been missing from the New England Patriots offense for 15 years. That guy is Marvin Harrison Jr. Maybe you find another guy in free agency if you can't get him or if you want to draft one of the top quarterbacks. But they have options here, and there really is a strong case to drafting a wide receiver in the early part of the first round, which I would have said is crazy. But like I said, Marvin Harrison Jr. is as close to a sure thing as you're ever going to get at that position, a position that has been very weak for the Patriots in a role that they've been missing for a decade plus now. So let's get that number 1 guy, particularly if Bill Belichick stays, so we can stop worrying about it. We can stop talking about, hey, this quarterback is missing weapons. We can stop making excuses, and then we can focus on the things that really matter. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., plus he he's an exciting guy. He's Marvin Harrison's son. He would boost jersey sales right away. He might be a Pro Bowler as a rookie. Some say like he's a top 10 wide receiver on day one, and you watch him in college, he looks like he really could be that guy. So, going to be interesting to see how this plays out again. It's going to depend on how the Patriots play against the Jets, how it plays out with the rest of the league. If they lose, do the Commanders lose? How does the strength of schedule play out? Is Bill Belichick coming back? And if he is he going to be the head coach and the GM still, or just the head coach? Or are we going to blow the whole thing up and start over? But you have a chance here. They have one more year of that elite defense, those really good players under contract before they lose a lot of them to free agency. If you can do a quick rebuild on offense, the Patriots are suddenly a contender again. I know it sounds crazy, but they were in a lot of one-score games this year, and had they had a competent offense, or even the same offense that just turned the ball over a little bit less, they would have won a lot more games. So there are ways to do a quick rebuild here. It doesn't have to be super flashy. You don't need to get that rookie quarterback early in the first round necessarily. If you get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of the other pieces will fall into place. Let me know what you think, though. Is Harrison Jr. a guy you would like to see in New England? Do you think that is a waste of a first-round pick? Do you say it's a quarterback no matter what? Or are you envisioning something else, going after one of those tackles? But let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube.